Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Meta Cafe. Grab your cup of coffee, your tea, your water, sit back, and let's chat a bit about astrology and human design. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. How about that eclipse? I'm feeling backwashed today, like I've been sideswiped, like the energy, as it came rushing in, uh, twisted us all up and then dropped us somewhere, like a tornado picked us up, dropped us off somewhere in Kansas. And I don't know where I am now, but I do know where I am. It's just an interesting sort of energetic feeling. Good morning, Suzanne. Yes, exactly. I think you're saying you feel the same energy, right? I don't know. I'm just tired, but I did have a busy weekend. But I think it's so much more than that. There was so much energy running over the last week. I don't think sometimes that we even realize how much energy is running until it's done. And then we're left with the sort of washed out feeling. And that's what I think we're going to be experiencing this week. And it's a good thing that this week is one of the milder weeks of the month and that we can move through some, rest, maybe gather our wits and our thoughts about us and just make some key decisions about where we go from here. And, it was a crazy weekend. Apparently starting Friday night, I wasn't even aware that there had been an airplane stolen from the Seattle airport. It's about 70 miles south of me. So I was never in danger. I wasn't even a part of this. I didn't even know anything about it until the next day when I was on my way down to Oregon and somebody said, "Oh yeah, what about that guy down in Seattle? Are you okay?" And I went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what are you talking about?" So I didn't have any clue. But apparently, the pressures of the eclipse and the pressures of all of the things that have been going on got to this person who stole an airplane. He was actually an airport mechanic, so he had access to the airplane and flew it, did some joyride things with it, and then crashed it into an island out in Puget Sound. Craziness, right? Crazy. It's crazy. And some people just don't deal with the crazy energy very well. And if there's something there that this person is dealing with and they're unable to get it to deal with that emotional energy, my guess is it was all emotional, then what happens is there's a break in the energy. And in this case, it was pretty dramatic, as Leo energy is really dramatic, can be really dramatic. It was insane. So let's see what everybody's saying here. One crashed in Payson, Utah also. I didn't hear about that either. I don't know if that is a plane that was stolen by someone and they committed suicide with an airplane, or was that just a plane crash, mechanical failure? I'm not sure. Mimi, yep, feels like the energy was big time whirlwind. Yes, it was. And, for me, the weekend was really good. I had a great weekend. I went down to Oregon with my family, and my granddaughter is going to be in a historical reenactment about the early settlers in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. So we had to drive down to Oregon for her to be fitted with what her costume would be and to pick up that she can get it altered and fit to her. And so while we were down there, my brother, who I went to see in Montana, happened to have flown into Portland. So we got to hang out down there with them for an impromptu barbecue with a bunch of families. That was a continuation of what had already been going on for me over the summer. And it was absolutely wonderful, just wonderful energy. And then yesterday, you can always tell, at least I can always tell, when the moon changes signs, because it feels like the energies change dramatically. Sometimes it's a significant shift, and other times it just sort of gently shifts. But this weekend, it was a significant shift from the drama and the heightened awareness of the eclipse on Friday and Saturday to Sunday, where it was all business and all work. My daughter's boyfriend is having to clean out his house because it's sold and the closing is on Wednesday. I think it is the 15th. So there's a lot of work that had to be done. So we pulled the family together and all went in and started, cleaning out his place, organizing how the move would go. It was amazing. And so Virgo, right? So Virgo to be able to plan, execute, and organize, execute the plan. So that was my weekend. I was up late. We didn't get home from Oregon until 1:30 Sunday morning. I woke up at 7, my usual time. Well, actually, I wake up at 6, but I woke up at 7 and then went back to bed for about an hour, got back up, and went on to blow out my Fitbit yesterday because of so many steps and so many stair climbs and so on. It was pretty fun though. And woke up this morning, sort of feeling this hangover feeling. And yes, of course it is because it was a whirlwind sort of weekend, but I also know that it was a whirlwind energy that was taking us in and spitting us back out. And we're now on the other end of it. And what do we do next, right? Well, what we do next is we take a look at what this week holds for us, because in the space now, after the critical energies of the eclipse, lie sort of the next steps for us. So let's look at today's energy. The moon is still in Virgo until later this evening. Remember, today is the day that we have the 20-minute void of course moon from 9:38 p.m. to 9:58 p.m. And that's West Coast time. So it'll actually be very early tomorrow morning for those of you on the East Coast, when the moon will move out of Virgo and into Libra. So our week looks like this as far as the moon is concerned. We're in Virgo, then we get into Libra, later in the week, Scorpio, and in the weekend, we are on the bridge of Scorpio and Sagittarius. So in no small measure, this is, definitely the moon moving through some critical parts of our astrology charts, but there are no real major aspects happening until we get to the end of the week. And even that one isn't a terrible aspect. So we'll talk about those in a minute. Today, the moon is in, like I said, Virgo. It is in a trine to Pluto in Capricorn, and Mars also has retrograded backwards far enough now. He is back in Capricorn. So there is a lot of energy now for industriousness that is aimed at a purpose. Organizational energy, in other words, that we can use to get something done or to plan for the future, to plan for the time, perhaps as these retrogrades release us as we move through the rest of this month. That we can actually take some new action, or action in a new way or in new directions. Today's a day to be detail oriented, to use practical energy, taking practical steps. In other words, that one foot in front of the other kind of steps. That's the moon in Virgo, and especially when it is trining other planets in earth signs. So practical forward movement. Gotta love it, right? So I'm sitting here looking at my desk going, when I opened up my computer this morning, it was still set. All the tabs open were the same ones that were open Friday afternoon as I finished my day. I didn't even bother to come back to my computer and close out tabs. I just closed the lid and went on, and I didn't look at it again until this morning. So interesting. All the work was there, and I went, well, I'm going to have to close all of these, kind of restart and get ready for the rest of this week. That's kind of what we have to do. We're going to have to look at where we were, what comes next, and what comes next is the plan for what comes next. Sort of a no-brainer, but also interesting energy, because some of the things that we are feeling toward the end of the week were out of our control and totally not something that we could really do much about. But today we have some planning and some action steps that we can take to practically organize ourselves for the upcoming week. And it's also a glimpse and a glimmer of where we go later next week when the when the sun moves out of Leo and into Virgo. So we'll feel that shift that occurs anyway, naturally at this time of year, or, between late August and through September. with the energy in Virgo, giving us access to cleaning out the closets, putting away things that we've used all summer, or whatever it is that we need to do to get organized to move into the new school year if you have kids, or just to organize yourself for what comes next for us in the fall. So this week we also have Mercury stationing direct. Yes! Stationing direct takes us away from one retrograde down. That same day, Mercury is in a sextile to Venus, and Mercury is the planetary messenger. And in the aspect with Venus, bringing us messages of love, perhaps, or helping us work through the things that we need to talk about within our relationships. Suzanne says she will mourn summer. You don't have to mourn summer yet. It isn't over. It isn't over. It is just that we can feel, right now I'm very aware how the days are getting shorter, even though, and maybe it's because I live so far north, our days are super long in June and early July. And then it begins that downward tick to shorter days where I begin to notice, like last night, of course, it was kind of cloudy, smoky in the air yesterday or last evening. About 7 o'clock, I noticed, wow, I kind of need to turn the lights on in here. So we begin to notice the changes. We're really aware of the seasonal shift that's about to occur. And so it gives us the time to finish up our summer stuff, right? Get your gardens organized and harvested, figure out what you're going to do next with the foods that you've harvested, etc. My husband brings me home a big bag of tomatoes from a man that he works with's yard, and they're sitting in my refrigerator waiting for me to decide what comes next. And what comes next, I think, is salsa. I love making salsa. Anyway, so we begin the shift. We can begin the shift, right? And we're just starting to feel it this week. Next week, it should set in more toward the end of the week, as we will now be in, we would then be in Virgo energy. So let's we also have the moon on Saturday when Mercury shifts, and then it also sextiles Venus. We also have the moon squaring the sun. And remember, that's the first crisis point of the new moon, right? It comes 1 week later when the moon and sun become square, and it challenges us for whatever it was that we were consciously embarking on through the new moon. So if you set intentions or had something that you planned on making as your manifestation work for the month, for this new moon, you come to the first crisis point. It is the crisis of action. It's like, oh, which direction do I go? What do I do? Where, maybe a challenge has approached you or shown up in your life. And now you're looking at, oh my gosh, how does that affect my intention? And so the first crisis is about, what do I do next? Right? What do I do next? I follow my human design template and I work through the way that I'm designed to work, right? Making decisions with my authority and using my strategy to get to those decision-making points. And if you don't know what that means, then check in with me over the next few days. I'll be rolling out the workshop that we're doing, the webinar for August 23rd. How fun. That'll be the first full day of Virgo. Haha. And so check with me on that in the next couple of days, because I'll be rolling that out. It is a free webinar on the energy, how to use the energy centers in your human design. And before you can use them, you got to know what they do. You got to know what they're about, and you got to know how you're set up, right? Because your setup is different from mine, is different from my next door neighbors, etc. Okay, we are also walking through the gateway portal of a new human design week, and that actually began yesterday. Let's take a look. The sun is at gate 4. You might remember gate 4. We talked about it a couple of days back when Mercury was sitting at that gate for an extended period of time. It is the gate where the shadow is that of intolerance, and the gift is understanding, and the siddhi is forgiveness. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. The earth, what grounds us, what brings that energy in of understanding and from the sun, grounds us in the energy of gate 49, which is revolution, which is rebirth. And in its lowest expression is the energy of reaction. We saw reaction quite clearly this morning as, and this is because, he's the best Trump, our president, or .045, as Mimi says, he's the best source of, he's the best mirror for us to see what energies are lining up for us. So I like, while I'm not necessarily a fan of his, I can certainly see the wisdom in the things that he does and how it affects us. And so his little tirade this morning against Omarosa Manigault over the tape that she plays of him not knowing, of course, that she'd been fired. And I don't know much about that story, so I don't want to speak too much of it. But that reaction that he has, which is preposterous and bluster, and I mean, he just goes on and on about he has to attack her as opposed to answering things in honest ways. And in a way, here we have this revolution that all of us have to understand, right? This idea of being able to become responsible about the creations that we have birthed in this world, in our lives. We can't just keep going on reacting to everything that shows up. Reaction is knee-jerk, right? We talk about that a lot. And there's not consciousness in reaction. It is an unconscious act, almost based on the spleen in our human design. And it's based in fear, right? There's a lot of fear energy in the spleen. And it's Snark Alert 45 has the best people. Yes, right? But he has the best people to show us the best lessons, right? There's really someday we're going to look back at this 4 years, because I'm assuming it's only going to be 4 years or less. We're going to be able to look back at this, and we're going to be able to see exactly what it is that he brought to us. And, this is amusing. This is just a musing. Not amusing, but a musing that I had while I was in a long car ride from here to Oregon. That I was talking with an astrologer on Friday, and I was telling her that I feel like my life changed dramatically with 9/11 and 9/11 2001, the Trade Center bombings. And not because I was personally affected by, I didn't know anybody that died in that. I didn't have any, personal connection to it. But it was absolutely a turning point in my life. And it came too at my midlife redirect, which is at about age 40 to 42. And so there was already going to be some kind of revolution that would occur in my life. But I think that it was literally a turning point for all of us in the world, because it was characterized by a point where all of the worst characteristics of our humanness would come crashing right into our faces, right? Where we would be forced to look at all of the shadows. And, 9/11 was it 18 years ago now, 17 years ago now, or coming up 17 years. And we're still dealing with those shadows. It wasn't like it was going to be just a quick little, oh yeah, we'll work through this. It's that we keep seeing all the different ways the shadow shows up in our world. And the people on the world stage are the ones that we can see how we're dealing with that or not. Or are we dealing with it or not? And I would say we are, again, still that feeling of being pushed through the eye of a needle, because we're being forced as humans to really reevaluate where we're going and what are we doing, and to become more and more conscious about it. So all of these things that happen in the outer world that appear to be, crazy, are really places within us where we are still crazy, where we're still crazy, where we're still in reaction, where we're still in victim mode, where we're not quite clear about claiming our authority and our power within us, right? So the people on the world stage, people like Trump, people like pick anybody out there that we hear about, and we see perhaps the the things within us that we're still having to work on, this, idea of the mirror. So yes, Wendy Garza, I saw some very, hold on, let me put that up here, Wendy. Oh yes, I saw some pretty ugly shadows in some very insecure people. They need Jesus. Yeah, well, they need somebody, right? They need somebody. They need, first, you've got to look within, because if you don't even look within, you cannot tell what all of this means for you, right? What does this mean for you? What does that mean for you and your family, for how you express your energy in the world? And, as much work as I've done on myself, and I'm sure many of you the same thing, a lot of the lessons that we're working on keep being repeated. And they get repeated because they're still, it's faceted. It is multifaceted. There isn't one straight line reason why things happen. It's multifaceted. And so we deal with the facet and it gets out of our reality. And then another facet comes in. Mimi, following your thoughts, politics, global are holding up a big, nasty mirror ready for it to be cleared. Absolutely. And that's what the eclipses are generally speaking about. I mean, in the bigger terms, it's not, obviously we experience them as individuals, but on the bigger, wider stage, we get to see what it is we still need to work at. What are we still working on? And so this week is really interesting from a human design aspect, because we're working with energies of revolution, revelation, rebirth. And the revolution through the earth this week begins inside you, right? With changes in your emotional patterns. It really all comes down to emotional patterns. And the emotional patterns begin where we look at the sun this week in intolerance, right? And our inability, or our always relying on the mind to try to make things clear for us. And the mind is totally incapable of doing that. We have to go deeper into the alignment that we have with our emotional self, with our heart self, and the 3 R's. Yeah, not reading, writing, and arithmetic. So true understanding here in this week, because the sun, the gift in the sun this week is understanding, lies outside of the mind. So let me say that again. True understanding lies outside of the mind. Have you guys ever heard the term koan? A koan, Koan. I had to look it up this morning because I'd never heard the word koan. And a koan is a riddle or puzzle that Zen Buddhists use during meditation to help them unravel greater truths about the world and about themselves. It was in their training to abandon dependence on reason, on logic, and forcing them to focus more on the more intuitive side of themselves for enlightenment. So again, another inkling here that we cannot use our minds to think our way through. We can recognize the patterns. The gate 4, which is what the sun is sitting at, is a gate of logic. And it sits on the ajna, and it's moving up toward the head center. The ajna is a center that represents certainty. When it's defined, we have certainty. When it's open, which about 50% of you would have it open, it means that you're more open-minded and concepts come in, concepts move out. If you have it defined, then you've adopted a specific set of thinking patterns, a specific set of things that you are certain about, and you broadcast that out to the world. In this week, then, we have the ability to take a look at what's going on in our minds and what has our mind convinced us of that might not be true. And maybe we can begin to release the dependence we have on the mind and on logic and change our world, change our lives. Logic is the recognition of patterns and our ability then to predict the outcome based on those patterns. So you can see sort of the problem inherent in that, right? Because the past is what we're basing that on. And we can sort of predict what happens in the future from the experience of the past, but the past doesn't always repeat itself in the same way. So our dependence on the mind to try to solve problems is problematic, right? Because we are taking and making assumptions about how things will play out in a way that may not be true, right? Or in a way that we might be creating the resultant patterns ending based on what we thought to be true, and it's not. So we have to leave space. We have to leave room for our ability to create something new, to be able to be conscious about what's happening. And, logic works for great things. Like, I know that the sun rises in the east, and if so, it sets in the west, because that's a pattern. That's a pattern based in experience, and a pattern based in every day we see that this is the pattern. But when we take logic to a pattern that says every time I get into this situation, this XYZ happens, you take away your ability to create your future, to create your reality. So in some ways, logic is not your friend, because it causes you to try to predict what happens in the future based on a pattern that's occurred in the past. So if you believe that every time you go out to get a job that you're turned down, or that you only get jobs that pay minimum wage, then you can see that logic is going to take you to the places where that could be proved true. So we have to use our intuition. We have to be able to use consciousness to say, I'm going to consciously change this pattern. I'm going to consciously change the pattern. I'm going to bring breath and space before I react and change my world. Make a revolution here, an inner revolution, because the revolution begins inside you. Remember, inside you, with the changes that you choose to make in your emotional patterns. It sounds so easy. I know it's not an easy task for us to do this, but here's a week where we get to focus on that. We don't have a lot of, crazy things happening astrologically. So we have time to work on ourselves. We're not having to put out fires. We don't have to get that fire extinguisher out this week. That doesn't mean there won't be things happening out there. It doesn't mean there aren't things that you have to deal with in your life, but maybe this is a week where we can bring more space and consciousness to what we want to do. Okay. Let's see what's going on out here. Mimi, I think I got everybody's comments. Thank you, everybody who comments. I love that. Any big concerns going on out there, questions, write them in here. Let's deal with that before I leave. I'm going to draw us a card for the week. I'm using my favorite deck, Wisdom of the Oracle. By the way, I was given, oh my gosh, what did I do with them? I was given 2 new decks this weekend. I haven't even gotten to play with them yet. So I may, hi from New Zealand. I'm gonna mess up your name, but I'm gonna try it. Tuara Adams. Tuara. I'm gonna put it up here for other people. Hi, Cohen from New Zealand. Love it. Thank you for joining us. That's awesome. Anyway, so I have these 2 new decks, and I'm gonna take a look at those and see how they might fit in with what we do here in the mornings. In the meantime, I'm just going to ask for a card that represents the best use of energies for us in the coming week. Ooh, and it's slow to come. Remember the other day, it just jumped right out at me. So let me just get my energy centered a little bit here. And I have an upside down card. We haven't had this one. We haven't had an upside down card in a while. We haven't had this one right side up for the moment. This is the card of exchanging gifts. Remember, we had this card a lot for a while. It seemed like we've had it 2 or 3 times in 1 week. 27, exchanging gifts. This time, however, it was upside down. And in this particular deck, that means we read the protection message. 27, an ending, because 27 is a 9. I pronounced your name perfectly. I can't believe that. That's awesome. And you're welcome. So let's look at 27. That's 32. So 27. The meaning of the card was called exchanging gifts. The essential meanings for us: the law of giving and receiving, currency, trade-offs, weighing costs and determining value. So the protection message here for us is this: be careful what you pray for because you just might get it. And then realize you don't want to face the hefty price tag that comes with it. You may find yourself in a situation you've always desired, but know you will have to walk away from or even fail at because you can't or won't pay the dues it asks of you. If you want to be a famous musician, you have to practice your craft every day. If you want to be a millionaire, you have to be responsible for managing the money and paying the taxes. Even a windfall bears a cost. It's okay, though, because spirit will help you achieve balance over time. Another message here reminds you that being only the giver and not the receiver plays out in many relationships in your life where you find yourself in victim mode or in a codependent dynamic or holding on to a false sense of control. Others may push you to continue to prove yourself. The time has come to distance yourself from this kind of imbalance. Being aware of the need for both give and take is the first step to your true destiny. It's all good and getting better. Not only can you handle this, but you can flourish as a result of it. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. So keeping that in mind also for the week. I also want to give you, I don't remember where I got Tom. He watches us every day, or he watches the video every day, but he's not usually up early enough to be able to watch us live. And he gave me 2 words, and I want us to think about these words for the week: thriving and flourishing. Thriving and flourishing. That's going to be, I'm writing them down so that I remember to bring these up this week in different ways. This week we are thriving and flourishing. Well, I think that's a fine thought to leave you with. I wish you all a happy Monday, and much love to all of you. We will be back here tomorrow morning, same time, 8 o'clock. Take care. Have a great day. All right. Bye.